Hello and welcome to Rising. I'm Amber Athey and I am back this Friday with Jessica Burbank. Jessica, hi.
I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but the aliens, they didn't beam me up. So promises made, promises kept. Back on Rising this Friday.
Absolutely. What is up first for us today, Jessica?
Well, Tucker Carlson is out with episode 4 of his Twitter show, this time offering his thoughts on the Fox News Chiron calling President Biden a, quote, wannabe dictator. Let's watch.
The main reason Joe Biden is not a wannabe dictator is because he just does not fit the profile as a man. Dictators have that look. You know one when you see one. Dictators build cults of personality around themselves, and they use those cults to deny the glaringly obvious. In his later years, to name just one example, North Korean dictator Kim Il-sung developed an enormous baseball-sized tumor on the back of his neck. It was huge, it was grotesque, it was right there, you couldn't ignore it. You couldn't possibly not see it. But in North Korea, state media did ignore it. They pretended it didn't exist, and so in some important sense, it didn't. If a tumor grows on a neck but no one acknowledges it, is it really there? Thankfully, nothing like that is happening in our country or ever will. If Joe Biden ever developed some profound physical or medical problem that was obvious to everybody, journalists would say something. This is not North Korea. We don't have state media here. If Joe Biden was, say, incapable of completing a full sentence, or mistook his sister for his wife, or suddenly started falling down in public for no reason, the New York Times would report on that and then get to the bottom of what was actually happening. That would be its duty in a free country like ours. It's not like they would cover it up. The very idea of a cover-up sounds like a conspiracy theory, a dangerous one, actually, so stop it.
Well, there you have it. I love the rhetorical device that Tucker is using there. He went on to talk about the fact that Biden had given that speech about democracy in front of that sort of demonic red backdrop that looked awfully dictatorial, and also mentioned the fact that the media has kind of refused to talk about so many of the corruption stories that we've covered on this show, Jessica. But Fox is not happy that Tucker has been doing this show on Twitter. They're apparently trying to go after him to get him to stop it by accusing him of violating the terms of his exit from the network. What do you think of Fox's response to this Twitter show?
I think that it's really revealing of the kind of dangerous media stronghold that some major networks have on their staff, on their reporters. They can control what Tucker says because he signed a contract and he's not even working with them. That's scary that we live in a world where that's possible. And I think this is getting at that larger issue. But as far as the Twitter show goes and what he's saying there, it kind of sounds like his thesis is Biden doesn't have that dog in him enough to be a dictator. He's just not, he doesn't have the vibe. He's not cool enough. But we do have a media that is very biased towards establishment candidates. That's very interesting. So it's kind of like we have the conditions where we could have a dictator, but Biden's simply not cool enough to fill that role, or I guess doesn't have the mental fortitude to, seems like a part of his thesis. And I don't know. I think it's good that we have Tucker Carlson being slightly more sensible than what they're reporting on Fox. I don't think Biden is a dictator simply because they're investigating Trump. I do think we have a problem with having a very biased DOJ and very biased media. I would agree with that. But I think Fox is going after Tucker because they know Tucker, uncensored by producers or the folks at Fox, is kind of a dangerous one that might make stronger arguments for what's going on in our politics and give better explanations than Fox can.
Exactly, and they're worried that he's going to continue to draw viewership away from their primetime shows. I believe their primetime viewership has declined by about a third since Tucker was forced out of the network. And I think Fox's major problem is, well, two major problems. The first is that they've never explained why Tucker had to leave. And some reporting from my colleague at The Spectator, Chadwick Moore, suggests that it was a condition of the Dominion lawsuit settlement for Tucker to lose his show. Other sources close to the situation have told me that Rupert Murdoch was apparently upset with Tucker Carlson because his fiance was a huge fan and thought that Tucker was some kind of almost religious figure speaking on behalf of God. And that really rankled Rupert Murdoch, who called off the engagement shortly thereafter. But Fox hasn't publicly confirmed or denied any of this. They've been really mum on the issue of why Tucker actually left. Other people have said it was because of the religious overtones of his speech at the Heritage Foundation the Friday before his unceremonious exit the following Monday. But again, nothing from Fox itself, and yet they are turning around and going public with this potential legal fight against Tucker for having the show on Twitter. So it's kind of like you can't have it both ways, right? If Fox is going to go after Tucker for allegedly breaching his contract, but then still remain silent on the reasons why he was forced out in the first place, that leaves viewers in a very unsatisfied position. And it's only, I think, more liable to turn viewers off and push them towards alternatives.
Yeah, and then we have Tucker's counter argument, right? Which is, hey, you basically admitted to blame by taking this settlement with Dominion, which you said you wouldn't do, and so you violated the contract first, which usually how things go with contract laws, whoever violated it first or after it's been violated once by one party, the contract is no longer legally valid and binding for Tucker Carlson in this situation. So if that's how this contract works, which many of them do, Tucker Carlson wouldn't have violated it. And I think we can understand the Murdoch's decision with Fox News if we just consider, all right, where's the money going and why? I don't think they're particularly happy with dishing out nearly $1 billion for this kind of a settlement. And I think they know that they could incur more lawsuits like this. It's not the first time the Murdochs have had a pretty scandalous lawsuit hit one of their news companies, which they have many of in many other countries. They had to testify in the United Kingdom about the wrongdoing of journalists there. They had journalists following members of the royal family and prominent figures, tapping phones. They've been involved in some really intense lawsuits around shady journalism in the past. And I think they've learned that their method that works best is to kind of send the establishment message with a little bit of anti-establishment rhetoric that we've seen in Fox, but generally toe the line when it comes to broaching any kind of legal ambiguity here. And so they don't want to be dishing out money in lawsuits. They want to be making money. That's what their board wants, I'm sure. That's what their shareholders want, I'm sure. Any of the news corporations that are owned by Murdoch. He's learned this lesson before. He'll learn it again. It's about the money. Is Tucker Carlson pulling some money away with this Twitter show? I don't know. Is 10 minutes of a news clip on Twitter taking away from people watching cable news? Maybe. But maybe they're just upset that he was fired without explanation and they were loyal Tucker fans. And now they don't want to watch Fox because they're upset about that. So yeah, using this exclusivity, it could be about money as well. It seems like that's what makes most of the decisions for the Murdochs.
Journalist Glenn Greenwald speculated on this, and he accused Fox News of trying to silence Tucker for his anti-establishment views. Let's watch.
Clearly, a 10-minute show is not intended to be a live show to distract other people or take people away from watching television. It's only 10 minutes long. It's not appointment viewing the way his previous Fox show was. And yet, Fox is adamant, emphatic, that he is not allowed to speak, even on Twitter, that he's allowed to speak nowhere, that you are not supposed to hear from Tucker Carlson at all until 2025, until notably after the 2024 election is over, after the GOP primary is done, the Republican Party picks its nominee, after the various criminal cases now facing Donald Trump work their way through the criminal justice system, and until the 2024 election is held. You're not supposed to hear from one of the most influential voices in all of American politics at all, because Fox News has decided that they're going to threaten to sue him if he speaks.
it really is scary that Fox could potentially sideline one of the biggest voices in political media until after the 2024 election. And it really speaks to this broader trend of a lot of media companies establishing these really rigid contracts and NDAs that when people leave companies, they end up having to silence themselves for a period of time. And I think that's really harmful to our public discourse. What was interesting about this episode 4 of Tucker's Twitter show is that he openly called out Fox for the first time. He's sort of hinted at issues that he had with the network in the past, but he actually names them, and he mentions the fact that this Chiron operator who put the wannabe dictator line on that Chiron on the Fox show was forced to resign because of the incident after being with the company for a decade and overall performing very well. And he basically accuses Fox of being in bed with the establishment and getting rid of this guy because, as you said, Jessica, they will traditionally kind of push at the edge, but overall toe the line.
Yeah, this could be a very interesting lawsuit between Tucker Carlson and Fox News. And regardless of how you feel about Tucker, this could be precedent setting in a good direction to regulate corporations from being able to control what individuals are able to say. If we think about the First Amendment of the Constitution, freedom of speech and freedom of press, would we be fine with a corporation saying, sign away one of your most basic freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution for a paycheck? Should that be legal in the United States of America? That's kind of at the heart of this lawsuit. That's what it sounds like. That's something that could be heard before the Supreme Court. And I'm not sure how Roberts Court would decide on that matter. We'd have to look at the details of the case, but it seems to me that this could end up being a really landmark Supreme Court case that would help us regulate corporations infringing on our free speech as individuals, especially when it comes to legacy media.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, there were so many cases of, I know it particularly in conservative media, of people leaving companies and knowing all kinds of shady things that were happening there and not being able to talk about it because of the contracts that they signed. And yes, you enter a contract willingly, but the reality is that pretty much every media company has this at this point. And so if you want to work in the industry, you basically have no choice but to sign away that right. And so it raises a lot of really fascinating questions about First Amendment rights and freedom of speech culturally as well. We're going to take a break and be back with more Rising.